Welcome to Conversations with Deborah, a bi-coastal dialogue heard exclusively on malcolmpresents.com. And of course, I'm Malcolm, which is Malcolm Presents is a internet streaming.
And I'm Deborah Manning.
And that's Deborah Manning. and she is on the internet streaming platform. And
yes, we are.
Yeah, and basically we speak about anything and everything, a lot concentrating on politics, but many things concentrating on just the style of life and what's happening with us.
Absolutely.
Anyway, you had some, and also Deborah was a connoisseur of the stock market, even though she's not, a licensed broker or officially an advisor, but she for many years has been a student of the market.
Yes.
So take it over, Deborah Manning.
Hey, thank you, Malcolm. What a beautiful day we have today. It's gorgeous here in South Carolina. Well, my name is Deborah Manning. I'm a native Southern Californian, moved to Greenville, South Carolina 6.5 years ago, primarily for economic reasons. Actually bought a house here sight unseen and actually came to South Carolina strictly doing the research that I was able to do, thank heavens, on the internet. So there is something to be said about social media because it can steer you the right way. As Malcolm said, I'm not a licensed advisor. However, I have been doing stock market for quite a long period of time, thanks to my late husband, Tom. And we used to have a program called Real Money. Malcolm was our producer on that program. It was a call-in program that helped normal, every average day people understand the power of the money that you have in your own pocket. So stock market has changed quite a bit since we did that program, Malcolm. Now you can buy fractional shares of stock. So if you are enamored with Tesla and Elon Musk, or you like Amazon, you could buy fractional shares of that as little as $10 to $3,000 or $4,000 if that's what your appetite is. At any rate, we've had a wild market. What's that?
Can you make any money like that?
Yeah, actually you do. Actually you do. One of the things that I do caution people about, get into the stock market, but once again, don't be greedy. Don't be greedy. I normally take my profits at about 10%, at the very most 15%. I take my profits off the table. It's kind of like being in Las Vegas, I suppose, but it's one of the greatest money-making machines for average everyday people if you stay common sense about it, and you do have to stay common sense. We've had a wild ride with the stock market lately. In fact, last Friday, you and I talked about the fact that the stock market was down 700 points at the time we were doing our broadcast. It actually closed under 900 points and then came back on Monday. This, of course, is Thursday now, but then on Tuesday, once again, it crashed another 900 points. And today, let's take a quick look. Let me take a look at my accounts here. You're looking at, it's up about 620 points on the Dow. NASDAQ is up about 394 points, and the S&P is up a healthy 105 points. A lot of pundits are out there talking about, have we reached the bottom? Have we done this? Have we done that? Once again, I'm very conservative about things. I ended up selling all of my stocks except for one at the end of 2021 because I was very suspicious about the situation with inflation, and well, we should. The reports came out today, and once again, our GDP has now slipped into a negative number. We went down, let's take a quick look. We were down 1.4%.
For those uneducated here, explain what the
gross national product is supposed to make it short and understandable, the overall productivity of the nation. So when the gross national product is up, it means you have healthy productivity, you have good labor participation, you have a good supply chain, all these various things. And in fact, we were at about a 6% at the end of 2021, which was great because, of course, we shut ourselves down vis-a-vis the pandemic in 2020. But at the end of 2021, we were at about a 6% GDP. Now, the first 3 months of this year, we're now down to a negative 1.4%. And what that basically means is that the supply chain disruptions are starting to catch up with us. And it also means that we have a possibility of slipping into recession. Now, recession means that you have 2 consecutive quarters of negative growth. Negative growth. We now have one quarter of negative growth. And if we have a second quarter of negative growth, then we're officially in a recession. What a recession basically is going to mean is that you have people losing their jobs, and you have less supply, less groceries, less lumber, et cetera, and unfortunately can spiral into some very serious situations. We saw that in the 1970s, and we started to barely come out of it in the 1980s. You remember those days, don't you?
I was too young then.
Well, I was a news reporter up until about the mid 1980s. And then I decided to get into the loan business, the residential loan business. And I do remember selling loans. Oh, my Lord. Everybody was grabbing them at 18%. Well, right now, the mortgage rates have gone from the middle 3s up to the middle 5s. And unfortunately, it starts to price out a lot of people in terms of buying a new home. Where are we at the bottom? Well, there's a couple of different people that say, yes, we're at the bottom. But once again, I don't know how you can perceive that. There's no crystal ball on all of this. I own one stock. It's Microsoft. And the reason that I own it is it has great profit margins in excess of 30%. And it's got very little debt, about 36% debt. What that means is that they at Microsoft are not going to have to go hat in hand to a bank requesting funds. They have plenty of money. In fact, in the order about $1.3 billion worth of funds. So when you're looking at some of the companies to potentially buy, and you can potentially buy them, you're looking for companies that have earnings that are going up and good solid operating margins. They've kept their costs down. Now, for example, Facebook has just announced its earnings. And for some strange reason, it went up. Oh my goodness gracious. I think it went up about 20% today. Only one slight problem with Facebook. Facebook has declining earnings and declining operating margins. So once again, you may be listening to all of these wonderful pundits saying, oh yeah, buy Facebook, buy this, buy that. You have to look at it in a very common sense way. The one bright thing that took place is that with the negative 1.4% GDP, it appears that consumers are buying. We've got a 7% this last quarter, 7% buying appetite by consumers. However, another report just came out this afternoon, and they brought that figure down to, hold on for just a second. They brought that down, they revised it down to only 0.5, 0.5% increase in consumer purchases. And that's one of the things you and I have been talking about. Please conserve your money. Start to get rid of those credit card debts. Extremely important to do that, because what's going to happen to all of us in the middle class is we are going to be terribly, terribly squeezed. In fact, we're starting to see retirees going back into the workforce, working at the Lowe's and the Home Depots and the Walmarts of the world, because once again, as Social Security recipients, those individuals got only about a 5% increase in their overall benefits. And yet inflation is running at 8%. And some of the things I'm listening to, and of course, I monitor the business channels 8-10 hours a day. I'm sorry. I'm a financial junkie about things. But they're saying that we could be looking at 10 to 12% inflation, which is something that we haven't seen since the 1980s, as a matter of fact.
Now, when you say we might be going into recession, is that the opposite of inflation? Would prices go down?
Not exactly. What's going to happen is that if you have a recession, you're going to have fewer demands in terms of wanting supplies and what have you. You can actually have that's what we had in the 1970s, 1980s. We had a loss of jobs, but we also had very high inflation, extremely high inflation. So it's a real quagmire here. And what's happening right now is one of the reasons that the stock market went nuts on Friday was that there was a comment made by the Feds. One of the Fed directors, as we had talked about last week, had made a comment that they're going to have to really be very aggressive in terms of increasing interest rates. And we haven't had to see an interest rate increase in quite some time, but they're talking about a 0.5% increase, and they're looking at possibly 3 or 4 of those 0.5% increases. And what it ends up doing is it starts to drain money away from many of the corporations. And any of those companies that need to go ahead and borrow money from the banks, well, the banks are licking their chops at this point, because they can go ahead and they can set whatever the interest rates are. And once again, where they're going to set interest rates? Well, for us with credit card debt, and I do have a little bit of it, they're going to go ahead and start to jack those interest rates up. And they're already at anywhere from 24 to 29% on a monthly basis, and a yearly basis, pardon me. So once again,
we talked about, as we talked about, I remember
it's going to be an interesting time.
I remember when those rates were known as usury.
Yeah, well, unfortunately.
And I still don't get it. If there's a recession when there are 2 periods that the gross national product is down, right?
Mm-hmm.
Again, so there would be less people, less products being manufactured.
It is less products being purchased. What ends up then happening is it's a spiraling situation. Then companies are having to lay off individuals. Those individuals are then going on to unemployment. They're trying to make things that make ends meet, trying to make sure there's food on the table and their rents are paid, what have you. However, the inflation is generally a trailing indicator of things. It's going to go ahead and stay a lot longer than is the wage gains. I mean, we've had wage gains of 5.5% to almost 6%, but we have inflation now in excess of 8%. And if a recession starts, once again, you'll see less hit in terms of the supply, but then corporations and companies will have to be forced to lay off individuals. And it's a cycle that is very difficult to be able to soft land.
Yeah,
And
but right now I know the unemployment rate is the lowest it has been in 50 years or 40 years.
well, it is. The only problem is that that we're still below. In fact, we've managed to create anywhere from 5 to 7 million jobs. However, pre-pandemic, we were at about 10 million jobs that had been created. And the people that have also not been getting the jobs, in many cases, are many of the minorities, and so are the many of the lower income individuals. So it's a real quandary here, because unfortunately it all got started because of a situation with losing our energy independence, and it started with that. And then all of a sudden, then you start to see the inflationary trends start on up. The other thing that happened was, we've talked about this before, the Fed went ahead and continued to print money above and beyond what was necessary. Now, the stimulus package, I mean, we were grateful to get the stimulus package. In fact, we had to close down our handyman business because we couldn't get insurance due to COVID. So we had to go on, we basically went on free fall. And fortunately, I had done enough financial planning so that we were okay. But as I say, it's been a very scary situation, I think, for everybody. And I'm advising folks, please start to pay off your debts. Please start to get your cash in place. And we're stocking up on our pantry. We're stocking up on our pantry, Malcolm.
When does depression set in? You said 2 quarters with the for recession down. How about depression?
I don't know. Depression, and let's please not go there, for heaven's sakes. If you read some of the history of what happened with the Depression, the Great Depression, the Feds did exactly what was wrong in terms of tightening the supply of money. And it got to the point where nobody could beg, borrow, or steal any. Well, I guess they could steal money, for heaven's sakes. They did with the various crazy things that were going on in the 1920s. But once again, monetary policy, they tightened up much too quickly. And that's one of the things that many of the pundits, the economic pundits that I'm listening to, are concerned about, that the Fed will tighten up too fast, that there won't be enough liquidity for basic companies to be able to survive, and they'll have to go to the banks, and the banks will start to charge them fairly high interest rates, all of a sudden it's this cascading situation where they're paying higher in wages, higher in interest rates, higher in this, and all of a sudden you're starting to see the true effects of inflation, and the true effects are people can't afford things, so they get laid off. So it's a fascinating study. I know my late husband, he taught me a tremendous amount about economics.
Now let's go to the top of the scale. How
Sure.
can Elon Musk afford $44 billion in cash to pay for Twitter? Does that put him in debt? Well, does he have the cash that he could put it in, or does he go in debt? Does his company go in debt?
He's
He's not like-
leveraging Tesla. He has a tremendous, he has SpaceX that has been highly profitable. Tesla has been profitable, and he's doing some leveraging. He's backed by Bank of America, by Morgan Stanley, and by Goldman Sachs. And those three institutions are betting on the fact that Elon Musk can run a business. He'll take it private, and he'll do the things that need to be done with it. In fact, the algorithms right now apparently are being reversed, so that many of the Republican participants on Twitter are regaining unbelievable numbers of followers, which would indicate to me that there was a tremendous amount of censorship going on. In fact, the lawyer for Twitter announced that she was very upset, and so upset that she was crying at the latest staff meeting about the fact that Elon Musk was going to be the new owner. But he's leveraged himself, and as a result, you're seeing Tesla stock go down. Many of the Tesla stockholders are concerned that Elon will not be able to run all of these companies. Now, all that being said, he's done okay with 3 or 4 that he's had. He's done okay. He's quite a remarkable individual.
Yes. So again, if you're a gambler, would it be a good time to see how low Tesla gets to buy that stock?
Well, I have bought Tesla in the past, and I'm waiting on Tesla right now. I want to see exactly, and I haven't checked its profit margins, and I haven't checked its debt position, but it could be very, very interesting. And once again, you don't need, Tesla's sitting in the 800s right now. You don't need to buy a single share of Tesla. You could buy, a sliver of it, and you still get the benefits from it. So,
Well, I think I told you, as far as I used to dabble in the market, years ago. But I mean, my dabbling was, maybe $10,000 to $20,000,
Mhm.
and at the time I was working full time, so it wasn't that much of a risk for me. But trying to figure out the ups and downs, and how you're really in not control of your money there, where what happens in the war, the world, where the Russian attack on Ukraine and different things, the pandemic, that you have absolutely no control how that affects your money in the market, and how you have to be in there for a long term. Like,
well,
I have friends that check every day. You go crazy if you check.
well, you can drive yourself crazy, or as I say, what I end up doing, because I do watch the markets and I do watch the business news on all of the channels because I find it fascinating. But it's common sense. So, for example, people ask me, why did you decide to go with Microsoft? Once again, profit margins were excellent. In fact, they were in excess of the rest of the industry. Their debts very, very low. And once again, I'm concerned about whether or not they need to borrow money. They don't need to borrow money. Now, would I buy Apple? I'm not going to buy Apple. And the reason I'm not going to buy Apple, very, very common sense. Their suppliers are coming out of China. China is still locking down their citizens in Shanghai, which is the financial center of China. Foxconn, which provides much of the inner workings of the Apple phones and what have you, has been forced to shut down. Once again, they're going to be reporting this afternoon after the close of the market. They'll be reporting their earnings, and I'm still staying away from it, because common sense is, if you cannot get your semiconductors, if you can't get the materials that you need to be able to make the products that you want to sell, then you're in trouble. And I know that a lot of people say you're foolish not to take Apple. Well, I just look at it in a common sense way.
Why couldn't somebody that has enough capital as Apple, why can't they make their own computer chips?
They're trying to, but
Yeah,
once
why are they
again, and they are,
dependent? Why
yeah,
haven't they?
yeah, they are making their own computer chips. The only problem at this point right now is many of those computer chips are being put together outside of the United States. And once again, I mean, this globalism situation, fine, it's hands across the sea and we're all together in this and what have you. But the problem becomes when you have an overdependence upon a nation such as China, who has made overtures saying that they will dominate the United States. They have economic reasons to shut down Shanghai and to also command some of the manufacturing um, requirements for many American companies.
Right.
So
Yeah,
I'd like to see it come back here to the United States.
right. Well, why wouldn't Apple open it in the United States or a country that's friendly, a government that's friendly with the United States?
Well, once again, and this is because, for example, my late husband Tom and I spent quite a bit of time in Hong Kong and in China, and the cost of doing business in China and in Hong Kong substantially lower because of labor costs, for example. Some of the commodities that are out of China, terribly inexpensive. That was what the lure was for many of these American companies. But unfortunately, it's a real catch-22.
Yeah.
Now that we've seen what's happened with the pandemic, and how China has had to go ahead and reel in many of the supplies, I think it's a real warning sign for us. And as I say, it was very attractive when you had easy labor and easy supplies coming in and out of China, in and out of Vietnam, in and out of India. But in many cases now, that's not happening, especially now since the pandemic.
Well, it's sort of, they made it attractive to draw us in, and then all of a sudden they closed the trap.
There you go.
But going back, I want to end this, the financial aspect, which has taken up most of our time.
Oh, sorry.
I had preferred, to the same way you look at, the companies. In my youth, I used to bet a lot of races, horses over in New York when it's Aqueduct and Belmont. And they have a paper called the Telly. And the Telly gives you the history in each race. They give you the history of the horse, the times that, the times that he ran each quarter, how he did against various competition. So if you would just read that, and they have that for every race, plus it's people called touts. More or less, they make their money by telling other people what to bet. They go into the track early in the morning, and they see how their horses are practicing. Because horses are like people. You wake up, you feel good, and you act well. And there are other days that, oh my God, I don't want to wake up. Horses are the same way. Certain days they wake up, they feel good. Certain days that they lag. So these touts look at the horses and they advise their people. So I was friendly with a tout who told me. So and each race, and he had like out of 8 races or 9 races, he had maybe 2 or 3.
Did you make money?
Yeah.
There you go.
I didn't bet that much because I always used to like to go to the long shot. Like if you had a 2-to-1 or 3-to-1.
But what you're talking about is exactly the way you need to approach stocks. Precisely.
But it was over in 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Each day, I remember listening to the radio or going to the track, and it was over.
Yeah.
You knew you win or lost. And what I would do, I was never, like the heavy favorite. The heavy favorite would win. But I would like to, maybe like a 4 or 5-to-1 shot. So if I bet $2, I get $10 back. Anyway, let's gear over, and we only have like about 6 minutes. You wanted to talk about the medical profession.
Yeah, I do. And I'll make this positive, because one of the reasons that you and I talk is to find common ground and to give good advice to all of the people who listen and watch us. My husband and I have had about a 3-month period of time of health scare, a real health scare. And I've kept it obviously to myself. I'm not going to advertise it particularly. However, I've learned quite a bit. At this point right now, it looks like everything is under control, and we are grateful. And if you are not a religious person, I know that I haven't been, but I certainly am now. And thank you, Lord. I I want to advise people that this COVID pandemic managed to cloud a lot of the observations by your doctors. And we had a situation where I've had to change doctors because the doctor that we had for a 5-year period of time became so wrapped up in COVID and the politics and all of that. And I didn't realize that. She ended up missing a critical test for my husband. And assumed that she had told us, no, she had not told us. She had utilized the computer to be able to write the information, what have you. Well, it was involving, at any rate, a cancer situation. And she kept blowing it off. And I finally confronted her and I said, listen, doctor, we hire you to be our eyes and ears for our health. And you ignored that. And I think you preferred more of the politics. And I think that many people need to look and talk to their doctor. I told my doctor and the new doctor that I talked to, I said, Doc, I need to live another good 20 years and I want to utilize your knowledge, your expertise, and your professionalism. I want another 20 years out of this body. I got one and I want another 20 years for myself and for my husband. And if the doctor doesn't say, good, I'm going to go ahead and we're going to work together on this, you need to change doctors immediately. I don't know what's happened to the medical profession, but I think it's become too politically entwined, and that's baloney. That is something that endangered my husband's life. And as I say, we had 3 months of total hell worrying about tests and et cetera, et cetera. And that was totally unnecessary. Once again, I changed the doctor and the doctor looked at me and said, fine, we'll have a discussion about how to live that next 20 years. And I want you to live healthy and wealthy and wise. So I cannot urge you enough to have that discussion with your physician. And if your physician is going to simply say, oh, well, that's a matter of just you getting old. And you and I, Malcolm, have had this discussion. That's baloney. Doctor should not be telling you that it's a matter of just getting old. That's baloney. That's not taking responsibility as a physician. So that's one of the things I wanted to, a tip that I wanted to make to everybody who's watching this. This is absolutely, completely, utterly life threatening if you don't take control of your health. Truly is.
Yeah, well, the problem is I find with doctors nowadays, well, number one, I think they're overworked, especially in the HMOs, which I'm a member of Kaiser.
Yeah.
Which, and I find out over the years, over the years, they become more and more busy.
Mhm.
And now, sometimes in order to get a doctor or to, it's like a 2-3 month wait. Unless, and if it's something urgent, then you go to urgent care.
Mhm.
But otherwise, it's, I'll call up a doctor for a general examination. Well, we have something in the latter part of May.
Mhm.
I don't want anything in the latter part of May. I want to go, with the next week or two.
That's right.
But they're overburdened. Then as you say, everything I have now, it's age related.
It's baloney.
They can't, what they do, they don't, I don't know if it's not preventive medicine, but it's, when you have something, they don't deal with the disease itself. Or how you can cure it. It's not a cure. It's how you can alleviate the symptoms.
Mhm.
It's sort of like, if you have a deep cut, you put a Band-Aid over it.
Mhm.
And they don't really deal with the cause of it. They deal with the symptoms of it.
Well, the one thing that I really can advise, you need to make sure that your doctor is your best friend. And that's literally what we did with this new doctor. He is our best friend. And you need to literally say it that way. I want you to be my best friend, doctor. I really want you to be. And when we had this situation with my husband, we said, so what would you tell your best friend to do? And then he looked at me kind of very strangely, looked at my husband and went, okay, this is what I would suggest. Once again, it's so important that we humanize and have that special relationship with one another. Because at this point, I know they're overworked, but you know what they're also hungry for? They're hungry for that personal touch with their patients. That's what they got into doctoring for. That's exactly why they got into it.
And you have to and you have to what I like, they call it the practice of medicine.
I know.
Because it's not a science. It's sort of like, oh, you got this. Okay, take these pills, and see if that doesn't go away in 2 weeks. Let me know. And you see all the commercials on TV for the
Yeah.
medicine. That is frightening.
Yeah.
For 30 seconds, it tells you what the pill does. Then for the next 30 seconds, it tells you the complications that might happen when you take the pill.
Well, one thing I can say is that the human body, if you give it half a chance and you keep a good mental attitude about things, the human body will do remarkable things to be able to heal itself. But once again, I implore all of you, please make your doctor your best friend. And I'm not joking about that. It's a matter of life and death. And as I say, we've personally been through this last 3 months, and we've come out changed individuals. And I'd like to be able to pass that on to all of the viewers here on Malcolm Presents. And Malcolm, thank you so much for taking the time to be able to do all of these interviews with common, ordinary people. Please, everybody, watch some of the other programs that Malcolm does. They're fascinating. They're ordinary folks like you and me, but they've got such nuggets of information that you could just be astounded.
Thank you much, Deborah.
Absolutely.
Under that note, our show is ended. I will see you next week.
Sounds good.
Have fun. Keep an eye on the market.
I will. And my best to your dear wife, Anna.
And my best to yours.
You bet. Bye-bye now.
Bye.